All right. Good evening, good morning, good day, everybody, wherever you are. My name is Madeline Smolarz. My pronouns are she, her. I'm calling in from Haldimand Tract Territory in Ontario, Canada, specifically a town that is now known as Brantford, Ontario, about an hour south of Toronto. If that's how you think about your Ontario and Canada geography, that's where I am in relation to our country's largest city. I am here today to talk to you with a good friend of mine about Great Government Advocacy. I'm a representative of Emerging Museum Professionals Canada Collective, and I'm going to start the slideshow so that you can all learn what we're all about and we can dive into this workshop together. A little bit of housekeeping. I would like to ask if anybody does have questions, just throw them in the chat and we will address them at the end. That way we stay on track with everything. Okay, so meet your presenters. I've already introduced myself. I'm the founder and co-administrator of Emerging Museum Professionals Canada Collective. We'll also be hearing from Krystal Newcombe today, who is my counterpart co-administrator, and she's also our Ad-Hoc Advocacy Committee steward. And then joining me is Anna Villegas, who is our Communications Committee steward. Anna, if you would like to say hi and do a brief introduction, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. My name's Anna Villegas. I am the Communications Committee steward. I also go by she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, which is a traditional territory of the Algonquin people. And I'm very excited to be here today and introduce you guys with Madeline to writing your own advocacy letter.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. All right. So you might be wondering, what is the EMP Canada Collective? Like, haven't really heard about you folks before, especially because Museum Workers Advocacy Day is a little bit more US leaning because of the folks who have been involved. Well, let me tell you, we are a volunteer organization of EMPs, like for EMPs by EMPs. There's about 17 of us right now from all across Canada. And we come together around this mission and vision statement, which is always available on our website, which I'll happily pop in the chat later on. So you can read our mission and vision here. Our mission is to foster an environment where emerging museum professionals can learn from one another, collaborate with each other, and advocate for themselves, their peers, and their role in the museum, culture, and heritage sectors. And we focus specifically on Canada. And then our vision is that we envision museum, culture, and heritage sectors where emerging museum professionals' presence and voices are fully amplified and their experience, ideas, and contributions to the evolution of these sectors are recognized, acknowledged, valued, and integrated into institutions, policies, and the workforce. Again, in Canada. We've been around for 3 years this coming spring, which is really exciting. We operate with $0. And like I said, all volunteer efforts as well. So here's a little bit about what we do. Obviously, advocacy. We'll be talking about the first 2 items here, the National Museum Policy Letter that we wrote to the Canadian government last year, and also Hill Day, which was an in-person engagement last year too. And we also do things like advocating for better wages. The Young Canada or YCW program of the federal government is problematic, so we've helped another organization with a survey around that. Anna, leading communications, does a heck of a lot around email, social media, website, branding, rebranding, coordinating job listings. We have a PD team as well, professional development, doing presentations at different Canadian Museum Association conferences, partnered programming, and our own programming as well. And then we just do fun stuff like Museum Scary Stories contests, which we did last year, annual holiday card exchanges, networking, lots of good stuff. So this is the table of contents for the presentation today. We'll be going over a couple of case studies. I have a third one, time permitting, so that'll be a fun bonus if we get to that. And then we'll close off with the workshop, writing a letter together about anything you folks want. Doesn't have to be museum stuff. We'll try to make it as fun and light as possible. And if people are stumped on ideas, happy to just riff off of some ideas that I have percolating too, and I'm sure that Anna has as well. So I'll be kicking us off talking about the National Museum Policy Letter. So I've titled or subtitled these slides in the style of Friends, the sitcom. So this is that time that we collaboratively wrote a letter to the Federal Department of Canadian Heritage to advocate for a new national museum policy. So National Museum policy in Canada, it's really long and boring history, but basically there has not been a new policy in over 3 decades, and the policy that currently exists only addresses national museums. So a lot of those are, well, there are not very many of those, and it doesn't address like the fulsome museum experience or museum worker experience in Canada. So for a long time, different folks in museums in Canada have been lobbying for a new policy, and the government has finally started to do a review of that, and we wanted to advocate for EMPs and make sure that our voices were being heard. So we thought they're doing a call for consultation. Let's be involved. We weren't invited to any of like the in-person consultations or the e-meetings that they were coordinating. And so we thought the best way to get to the federal government would be to submit to their kind of general feedback inbox, which was receiving a whole bunch of different letters and feedback from the museum community and anyone who was interested in this policy. So how did we do it? It sounds like a pretty intense undertaking, and we're just a bunch of volunteers, right? So we really started off with research. We had the sorry task of reading the two previous, like the current and the previous versions of the National Museum Policy, those very aged documents, and then did a research into other National Museum policies that exist other places in the world to get an idea as to what a modern National Museum policy can look like. So there were definitely a couple of months of research that had to happen. So then we started to capture ideas. Being that we have no money, we use free tools. And so we started capturing our research and our ideas in a Google document because we use Google Drive, nice and free. And everybody was feeding into that. We turned on, comments and suggestions so we could track who was suggesting what. And we just did a bit of a brain dump. Everybody put all of their ideas in one spot. And then we did a final push in the weeks leading up to the close of that community consultation that the Canadian Heritage Department was doing. So this is when we really slashed things, really tightened it up, and just had like a big concerted push because this deadline was looming and we had no choice. So then we finished off with distribution. We sent off that letter to the government, and we also actually published it on our website to share with our community and to call attention to the National Museum Policy renewal process as well. So you can actually go on over to our website to check that out. And yeah, when I change the slide, there we go. You can see the handle there. Our website is empemcanada.wordpress.com, and the letter is on our blog. So you're more than welcome to see that. So just in numbers here, we had, in the end, just 660 words, which is, I'm proud of us. I can be kind of wordy when writing, and that was a nice tight letter. At the time, we were a group of not as large as we are now. And so there were about 10 Emerging Museum Professionals Canada Collective members involved in the writing. And Krystal really, she was the one who did that big final push. So kudos to her. And in this letter, we made 4 core demands of this department in creating a new national museum policy, so that it would be a very clear and very compact call to action for them. So yes, that is the National Museum Policy letter that we wrote. And I mean, it's there for free online. So if it's helpful to you and your own advocacy to refer to it, please do. We'll be leaving it up there for as long as our free website stands. So there you go. All right. So now we're going to head on over to Anna and Krystal to talk about Hill Day. So this is that time that we sent Krystal to Ottawa to meet face-to-face with federal government officials to advocate for Canadian museums. I will allow Anna to give the introduction to this, and then she'll flip it back to me to play the interview that I did with Krystal yesterday. That's just about 10 minutes long, where she talks about from her home in Alberta, essentially what her experience was like and what she learned. This is probably something that not a lot of EMPs have experience with, so I wanted to make sure that Krystal could talk in her own words, even though she couldn't be here today, about that experience. All right, Anna, please go ahead and give us a bit of background about Hill Day.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for that for starting off the presentation for us. A little bit of background on Hill Day. Hill Day started all the way back in 2009, and it's basically a started in the US, but it spread to Canada. No, that's wrong. It's in Canada, Parliament Hill Day. It was basically an event in which the Parliament invited delegates from across all industries and sectors to send over delegates and meet with parliamentarians to advocate and spread awareness on various issues that they felt were important to highlight to their parliamentarians in order to shape and federal provincial policy on those issues. So for instance, the CMA last year in 2023, the Canadian Museum Association sent over 30 delegates over to Hill Day to discuss various issues regarding museums. For instance, they one of the reports that they wanted to talk about on Hill Day was the move to action, the advocating UNDRIP in Canadian museums, and that report's available on their website, and I'll put the link in the chat for that as well. And EMPCC also sent over our own delegate as well, the lovely Krystal, to discuss her experiences and the issues that we felt were important to EMPCC. So I'll just move over to Krystal's testimony on that day.
Okay, awesome. Oh, I love the word testimony. So good. Krystal might hate me for this screen grab, but I love how she's like animated in it, and she talks with her hands a lot. And obviously this is not, we got free tech here, folks. So I'm going to share a different screen, not just hit play and have it be nice and seamless, because that'd be too easy. So I'm going to stop sharing very briefly. And I'm going to share a different screen. So sit tight. All right, fantastic. Lovely. I'm going to share sound so you all can hear her speak. Okay, lovely. Anna, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the player?
Yes.
Awesome. Here we go. Okay, fantastic. My name is Madeline Smolarz. Can you hear that okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. And I love how you can't see my face. I didn't realize that. So now you just get to look at Krystal for 10 minutes. All right, here we go. Pronouns are she, her, and I am the founder and co-administrator of Emerging Museum Professionals Canada Collective. Joining me today is Krystal Newcombe, who will be introducing herself, and she'll be speaking today about Hill Day 2023. Krystal, please introduce yourself before we launch into the questions.
Yes. Hi, my name is Krystal Newcombe. My pronouns are she, her. I am one of the other co-administrators of Emerging Museum Professionals of Canada Collective. I also work as the head of Indigenous engagement with the Royal Alberta Museum, and I'm also on the advocacy committee with EMPCC.
Great. Thank you so much, Krystal. All right, so I have 4 questions for you today that we'll go through in lieu of you actually attending Museum Workers Advocacy Day. So thanks for being available for this. So question 1, with respect to Hill Day, how did you get involved?
Well, the team at the CMA did actually reach out to me. I believe they had been canvassing individuals that they knew and were asking about people that potentially they could ask or target to see if they would be interested. And I'm pretty sure it was you who had recommended my name forward. And so they got a hold of me and asked if it was something that I would be interested in, and I was. And that's how I got involved.
Yes, trick question. It was me who put your name forward. But I'm so glad you were able to go because you are a wonderful representative for emerging museum professionals in Ottawa. All right, so question number 2, how did you prepare for Hill Day?
Well, the CMA did make it really easy. They put a lot of work and effort into it, but essentially what they did was they prepared information about all the individuals that we would be meeting. So both politicians, senators, and policymakers. And it was something that I did a bit more of a deep dive in on my own, but is obviously something anyone can do is, look into politicians, their backgrounds, see what sort of topics and issues they tend to advocate for or they tend to be interested in and passionate in, and then really align those interests. So learning about the types of things they've been involved with. And one of the other things they had arranged that I think was really great was they contacted an organization that does advocacy professionally and trains people on how to do that. So we had a session with them as well, where we basically got the lowdown, and it was great, especially for people like me who was a first timer, who said, this is what it will be like meeting with a politician or a policymaker. So going over, they have tight timelines and schedules and the sort of points to hit, how to be accurate, how to sort of engage and get their attention. And that was all really helpful because while, the people you're speaking with are people, they have particular agendas and things that they have to do and work on. So making sure that you are really focusing on how to bring those into alignment so that you get those people on board with with the message you're giving them and get them on your side, to be that person who is advocating at a much higher level for what you're asking for.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Definitely a lot of legwork by the Canadian Museums Association, but a great example of how much prep needs to go into these types of things to be successful.
Exactly. And one of the other really big parts is really just understanding what is the key message? What are you asking them to do? Because it's all well and good to give them a lot of information, a lot of data, which we did have, but what are you asking them to do? And to be really concise and clear with your call to action, essentially, for them.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the actual experience, flying to Ottawa, being there, what was that like for you?
It was amazing for two reasons. One, actually getting to talk to politicians, policymakers, and face to face to tell them this is really important and this is why it's important was really great. The questions they asked were really meaningful and I think really helped frame what we were asking for a lot better. You understood a little bit more of, from a politician's side, what they need in order to run with a particular cause or an issue. And I think, the more you do it, obviously, the better you get at it. For me, I did end up meeting with one of the MPs that were representing my riding at the time, whom I had met and who knew me. So that wasn't by accident. Again, the CMA organizing that. And that's really helpful and good because you can either use your established connection with them, or you can continue a new connection with them afterwards. So if you're going to, in the Canadian context, your local MP, that's a person who is already in your riding, who is someone you could probably have access to and connect with again to sort of reemphasize and build a relationship. So there, again, it's easier for them to work through and advocate for what you're advocating for. So that was great. The other side of it too was being able to meet with peers in my industry, people who many of them were all representing museum organizations, heritage institutions, all across Canada, people who I wouldn't maybe normally have the chance to meet with all in the same room, who were all there, not necessarily for a conference, but we're all there for the same kind of goal and cause. And one of the other things we got to do was we were all partnered. So we all got partnered with one or two people. And the person I was partnered with had done this before. And it was a great, again, learning experience to see how she interacted with these individuals. And it was an amazing experience. It was very, very interesting because I got to meet with two MPs, but also a senator. And, you know, advocating at the Senate level isn't necessarily something I had thought would be fruitful. And the particular senator we had met with wasn't necessarily keyed into cultural heritage and that industry, but was probably one of the most receptive to that message, to the information we were giving them, which I thought was fantastic and quite a surprise, but a really pleasant one.
Well, that's a beautiful segue into the last question, which is what you learned. And it sounds like you learned sort of by example, by watching somebody advocate who had done this before. So you sort of learned best practices for that. But what else was a big takeaway for you in terms of learning from Hill Day?
I think that the easier you make it for politicians and policymakers, the easier your message gets across. Really handing them what we all had, sort of flat sheets that had details and, you know, stats and information. I think that's incredibly important, in particular for policymakers, because it's helping doing the work for them. And that really is, I think, what the advocacy is around. You know, there are so many politicians, so many people who know that there are industries, not just cultural heritage, but they know that there are industries who need help, that need support at a government level. And they know that, but to make yourself sort of stand out from the crowd, because of course you're not the only industry, you're not the only person advocating on Hill Day, you're not the only industry. I mean, we were running into, when we were going through security in those buildings, like many other organizations and levels and industries that are all doing the same thing that you are. And I found one of the easiest ways to really stand out is to give them the information, give them what they need to really start plugging away at stuff and writing legislation and writing policy. The easier you make it for them, the easier it is for them to just jump on board. That was probably my biggest takeaway. That and how to be really concise. You have maybe like 10, 15 minutes at most, if that. So you've got to have that elevator pitch down, and you've got to be really clear when you're answering questions, because they will have some tough questions. And always, if you promise to get back to them with information, follow through with it.
All excellent lessons learned. Thank you so much, Krystal, for speaking about your in-person experience at Hill Day in Ottawa in 2023, and for providing the content for this case study.
No, not a problem. I'm happy to help and to encourage other people to get involved, because you don't have to do this on an organized Hill Day. You can, as an individual or representing any organization, do this at any time. It's easier when everyone's organized as a group, but you could do this and make an appointment with your local politicians at any time to advocate.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. Go start knocking on doors and meeting with politicians.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Krystal. I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. You heard it here first, folks. Go start knocking on some doors and meeting with some politicians. I don't know anyone else who is half as excited about advocacy as Krystal, so I'm so glad that I was able to grab 10 minutes of her time on a busy work day to be able to capture her experience and to have that communicated to you as well. So thanks to Krystal, even though she's not here, that's all right. She was here in spirit and certainly in message for sure. I did want to basically have Krystal's words up on the screen. And this is a great reminder of some important things to keep in mind when advocating face-to-face to politicians. Is there any wrap up or kind of closing comments that you wanted to give, Anna, about your own learnings, like in terms of learning about Hill Day and such, because you weren't part of EMP Canada at that point?
No, I didn't know anything about Hill Day coming into EMPCC. It's only that I learned about it when I was already when I came into it. So when establishing actually this workshop, and so finding out that there was actually a time and place to meet with politicians is actually something that I wasn't aware of, and I think should have some awareness of to be spread about. And I love hearing about Krystal's experiences and how much her presentation is really helpful. I think like very, very lesson oriented. And so yeah, by learning about Hill Day, I guess gave me some positive vibes about what I could do as an emerging museum professional.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of museum folks, a lot of us are introverted. And so knowing what to do in terms of how to prepare, how to put yourself out there, how to be ready for an interaction with a politician when you want to do some advocacy. Even if like a politician has come to your museum's event, it doesn't have to be like a specific engagement around advocacy. You can still make it happen and still, you know, slip in a couple of important messages for them, and they might not even realize it until they go back to work later and think, I really enjoyed my time at XYZ museum. And oh yes, this individual who works there spoke to me about this issue and I want to follow up, and they followed up. So let's continue that conversation. Yes, and I feel like if anyone wanted to reach out to Krystal, she works at the Royal Alberta Museum, as she mentioned, the head of Indigenous Initiatives. And so I'm sure you could easily find her contact info and reach out if you wanted to pick her brain a little bit more. And then also connect with the folks at the Canadian Museums Association. There we go. I'm actually on their board of directors. They are always game to share resources, and I'm sure they would love to talk about their Hill Day experiences too, especially because 2023, they really built it out very, very well, and had some really effective conversations. All right, so we do actually have time for this bonus third case study. This is actually not an Emerging Museum Professionals Canada Collective endeavor. However, it is one that I felt would be important to bring up because I did do it as part of another volunteer organization, the Group of Ontario Emerging Museum Professionals Committee, that advocates for emerging museum professionals just at the provincial level in Ontario. And this is at also a different level, not at a national level, at a provincial / municipal, like local level, this kind of advocacy. So essentially, this is a time when I led a letter writing campaign to successfully help convince a town to not cut their one museum position. So a little bit of context, Sudbury is a city of approximately, I think, 170,000 people now in almost northern Ontario. So that's actually a pretty large size city for that area of Ontario, which is definitely not as densely populated as Southern Ontario, where I live and also where Anna lives too. And so for the municipality's government to want to cut the only museum position they have for that entire town, which is like the only major town for like many, many hours, this was a really disturbing to hear about. So actually it was a member of the community who posted this sad news back in 2021 on the, for short, Go EMP Committee's Facebook group. And I just couldn't let this go. It really bothered me, especially because I had spent a lot of my childhood near Sudbury, and I just wanted to do something. So, looking at our devices, we see all kinds of news, and this was the news that came up out of Sudbury. So they were essentially looking in early 2021 to find some savings, and they wanted to achieve some of that by cutting the curator position, and that was the only museum position. I believe they had some seasonal summer staff that was funded by grants, government grants, but otherwise they just wanted to leave their museums closed, partially due to COVID, but also partially due to budget reasons. So there was a lot of uproar in the Sudbury community. But for my part, I thought, how can we get the local government in Sudbury to wake up? I can't go there. Very few of our community live there. What if we just spam the mayor? So what I did is I wrote essentially a draft, or a template rather, sorry, a template of a message that could be sent as an email or as an actual letter in the mail to the mayor and councilors, city councilors of the city of Greater Sudbury. And so I introduced it or started off by introducing myself, or, space for whoever's writing the letter to introduce themselves, to mention the news item, to mention your reaction to it, negative reaction, and then to list all of the reasons why museum jobs are important, and why also in general, museums are really important to a community too. Because it wasn't just that they wanted to cut this job, they also, by doing that, were leaving their museums without the support of a professional, and they would probably, become obsolete and become quite neglected and maybe, closed forever. So then, yes, there was a call to action at the end of this short email. After that tirade of reasons why museum professionals and museums are great, saying, please reconsider and consider the ways in which this position and the museums will actually earn money for your city. It is annoying sometimes with politicians to just kind of nickel and dime things, for it just to come down to I'm going to be a Canadian, loonies and toonies, like a couple of dollars, but that's sometimes how you can get their attention, is to talk dollars. So I posted this draft to the very engaged chat that was now happening on the Go EMP Committee's Facebook group. And I said, anyone who wants to join me, here's the template. I shared it as a Google Doc that was accessible to anybody. And people started sending it off. And I have no idea in the end how many people use that template to write, but it was well over 20. And then in addition to all of the great pushback that came from the actual community in Sudbury, the city decided to keep it, which is incredible. So they drew some funding, not only to reinstate that museum curator position, but then also to staff the museums to be reopened in the summer of 2021, as we all started to come out of COVID and reopen our organizations a little bit. Yeah, it was actually successful. So not to say that, I did that all by myself, but I think that it was a real show of solidarity and a real show of strength from the museum community, that a lot of people used this letter template, got fired up, and sent it off to the mayor and city council too, to make sure that they were aware of the consequences of their actions, if they did remove this museum position. So yes, that was a nice news story. After all of the doom and gloom of COVID, for the entire year prior, I think museum folks needed this. It was a good news story in Ontario for sure. All right, so we are moving on to the final stage before any Q&A at the end. And then after, of course, we finish recording, I'm happy to stay for a few minutes after too, if people have questions they want to address off recording. So we're going to go do a workshop and write a letter together. So this is the time that you, the audience, along with Anna and myself, write an advocacy letter to someone who needs one, someone in government, to learn how to get started. So a couple of general pointers to kick us off. Anna, do you want to walk us through these and provide any extras that you might want to cover?
Yes, thank you, Madeline. And of course, thank you to Krystal. So first off, the number one rule with drafting a letter towards, especially to a policymaker, is to keep it simple and to use clear and plain language. As Krystal reiterated in her experience, you only have like 10, in a face-to-face meeting, you only have 10 to 15 minutes with the politician, and you generally want to use an elevator pitch. And that's kind of the same strategy you'll also want using a letter, to keep it brief and simple, and so that you prioritize the important elements that go with the letter. Politicians are very busy, and when they want to reach a letter, they want to get to the point very quickly so that they can move forward with any follow-up agendas that they may have regarding these issues that you brought to them. Secondly, keep it on topic and don't wander off course. So what that means is that you want to make sure that your key points that you've advocated for are highlighted in a way that that you don't wander into other topics. You don't want to get muggled. You don't want politicians to be confused. You only have so much time, so it's important to make sure that when you bring it up, that you establish that these are my 3 or 4 points, and this is why they're important. For instance, in the EMPCC national letter that we did, we have 4 core points. And if you look at the letter, you see how they're all spaced out and what exactly we wanted to achieve with those core points. And of course, second to last is, keep it short. The briefer, the better. Elevator pitch. Really get to the point. As Krystal, as Madeline did with her letter, she did brief introduction, brief reaction, why the museum job was important, and lastly, her call to action with it. And that's normally the structure that you want to go through with a letter. And lastly, some considerations when going to the effectiveness of your letter is your timing of the delivery. Krystal, like Krystal said, she had 10-15 minutes. Perhaps you also want to time your delivery as well around that point, in terms of what might be considered brief. Your method and your frequency of delivery as well are some things to consider. Maybe a letter is better. Perhaps an in-person meeting might be better. And also the frequency of delivery. So how are you gonna spread this letter to other people? Madeline did it through Facebook so that more people can deliver the same letter to people. So it can have that much more of an impact and much more of an audience to more politicians and things like that. So these are some pointers and considerations when writing your letter.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, these were the quickest, most straightforward general pointers I can give that will hopefully be helpful to anybody, regardless of the content of the advocacy that you are doing. So we generally follow these 6 steps when we think about writing an advocacy letter or message. So step 1, well, who are you? And what about your identity has led you to take this stance? Well, I'm a museum professional, have been for 10 years, and that is why I care about museums and museum workers. Great, fini. Sorry, this is an American audience and I'm using un peu de français. Step 2, who are your targets? Is this someone on a municipal council? Is this a federal official? Is this multiple people operating at a province or state level? Is there just one target, or are there actually many? So you really need to think about your audience when you start to flesh out ideas around an advocacy letter. And then what is your cause? You know who you are, you know who you want to target. What are you fired up about? It is important to be very, very clear and very focused on what your cause is. Again, just to be nice and concise and to keep things on topic. So step 4, okay, you know yourself, your targets, and your cause. Well, what are your demands and calls to action around that cause? You know, if you just write to a politician, this is how I feel about this thing, and that's the end of it, well, it is a lot harder for them to have a proper response to that if they aren't told what you want them to do, what you hope they do with this information. So this is a wonderful time to make your demands clear and to, if you can, think of some calls to action, like what are actions that you want these folks to actually take to make changes around these issues that you care about. So then step 5, what will inspire your targets to take action? I mentioned before, sometimes it's a little unfortunate, but sometimes you have to talk about money. You know, museums are economic workhorses, huge economic drivers of, you know, the arts, culture, heritage, tourism, etc. sectors. They are employers. They are hubs of information, repositories of knowledge, places of learning, democratization, all of these beautiful, wonderful things. So talk about things that will inspire your targets in real ways. And then how can you give your targets a little final push? After I stopped recording with Krystal yesterday, we talked for a little bit more, and she said that she found it so interesting that when at Hill Day, she got politicians to wake up the most when she talked about things that were lacking, that Canada did not have when it came to museums. Like, we do not have a national repatriation policy, and we are one of the only, you know, countries who have not signed onto UNDRIP, for example, and that really took some politicians aback. So how can you really stick to them at the end of your letter to really want them to respond and quickly? All right, so in our last little bit of time here, we're going to head on over to Jamboard, and we will put this link in the chat if you'd like to follow along. I'm also going to actually share my screen so that you all can see what I'm doing. Let me throw this really quickly in the chat. Perfect. And it's honestly a-okay if it's a time of day when participation is not something that you are super into. That's all right. We're basically just going to walk through the thinking of doing this type of letter. So when it comes to a cause, it's Museum Workers Advocacy Day. So an easy, not easy in many, many words, but fair wages for museum workers is definitely one potential cause. Anna, you're more than welcome to throw in some ideas there too. Another important one, of course, is wage and salary transparency, which I know NEMPN advocated around a lot, and actually were successful very recently in getting certain job boards to start sharing wage and salary transparency, like actually sharing the salaries of different jobs, or the hourly wage, doesn't matter. It's so important. So it doesn't even have to be something, you know, museum workers related. It can be, you know, like structured funding for small local museums. Oh, there we go, in my state. So just having a cause right off the bat, it's easy to start to snowball, but really you just want to pick one. So Anna, do you feel super passionate about any of these or any other cause that we want to move forward with?
So for me, it would be wage and salary transparency. That's the one that that my committee is mostly focused on.
I feel that. I'm trying to send this backwards, but it definitely won't let me. So what I'm going to do is circle it instead. There we go. I'm so sad that Jamboard's going to be going, but it also is frustrating sometimes too. All right. So now we know that we want to talk about wage and salary transparency. So when we go on over to who are your targets, well, we know that wage and salary transparency is our issue. So who do we want to target with this? Well, who are the ones sharing different jobs out in the world? It's probably going to be museum associations. So, okay, museum associations, but that's a very general thing to say. Who works at these museum associations? Okay, you've got your executive directors, you have your managers, you have assistants. Maybe there's actually people, yeah, we're just going to go, we're going to use this however we can. There are actually people working there. Who would be best to target? Okay, well, who probably has control over those job boards and the decisions around them? It's likely folks who are more in upper management. So you can target those folks, you know, the director or directors, the board of directors, maybe, because executive directors and CEOs at museum associations answer to them. Or you can just spam all of them. Why not? When you're first reaching out, maybe don't spam too much, but certainly send a message and ask for a meeting. Okay, so we're probably going to reach out to the board and directors. Let's keep things, you know, pretty straightforward for now. Well, now we're thinking about who we are and what about our identity has led us to take this stance. I'm now realizing that the slide I shared with you folks before this, I changed the order slightly once I made this Jamboard. So I apologize if you're confused that things are slightly out of order for these first three points. Well, guess what? We are museum workers. And that's why we care about this, because it directly involves us. We benefit / do not benefit when there is or is not wage and salary transparency. Very clear line drawn here. You can also say like you're a museum or a museum appreciator, because I think a lot of museum folks working and volunteering in them just appreciate museums in general, and loving museums, going to museums, that's a great one. Means that you care about the people who work there too, because it's going to result in better museum experiences. All right, so this is why we care, and this is who we are. So what are your demands and calls to action? Now it's getting a little bit nitty-gritty. Well, it can be as simple as share the salary. I need to turn my caps off. It's like I'm yelling on these sticky notes, but basically just share the salary. Make it a requirement that people who submit jobs that they have to have a wage or a salary attached to it. Perfect. Anna and I are doing twice the work, but that's okay. I'm also like trying to brainstorm as I go too. And this is what it can look like too for just yourself on your own and also with your teams. Doing something like this or in a Google document can be super helpful. I think also another important thing that I've also personally advocated for is no paywalls. If you need to have a paid membership to a museum association or a particular organization to get access to the job board, that is not in the spirit of wage and salary transparency. I don't care if that job board then actually has the wages and salaries shared. If I still have to pay to get in there, you're still blocking me from that information. And that is still not in the spirit of wage and salary transparency. I feel so many things about that. But anyways, So yeah, we have a couple of really clear things. Literally just simply share the salary and then build it out further. Make it a requirement that people who submit the jobs, they've got to have this. No paywalls, like just a couple of things that can be achieved by your target in support of your cause. Alrighty, what's going to inspire your targets to take action? Okay, I have a nice easy one. Happy museum workers equals happy museums. I really would be remiss to not mention the fact that the largest art gallery in Ontario, in the most populous province in Canada, workers are on strike today at the Art Gallery of Ontario for the first time in a very, very long time over, very inequitable situations that they are all facing. Just general wellness is so important for a healthy sector and for healthy institutions and organizations. Yeah, good publicity. Like looks very bad for the AGO, the Art Gallery of Ontario today, that they're closed because all their workers walked out on them and they're picketing outside. When their executive director, it was just revealed, he makes almost $1 million a year. That's wild. Wild. In this economy, come on. So it's also going to be something like it's a good point of advocacy for the association or group business, whatever it is that has this job board and that is sharing these job postings. It's very likely, especially if they're a museum association, that advocacy is part of what they do. It's part of their jam. So yeah, just think about things, put yourself in their shoes and think about things that are going to really get them inspired to take action. Well, how can you give your targets a final push? Give them real world examples of what happens when things are not good for museum professionals. You can share a news story about what's happening at the AGO. You can share, yes, case studies. That's a great example. You can also share examples of how other places have done it, because it is now more common than not for places to have wage and salary transparency, and you're actually an outlier and old school and playing by some old silly rules if you aren't sharing the wage / salary. So if you got to name and shame a little bit, do it. But again, put yourself in their shoes. What's going to be a final kicker to give a final push around what you care about, which in this case was wage and salary transparency. So we wanted to show you in a very short period of time, like that was less than 10 minutes, how you can very easily workshop around these 6 separate steps, or even create your own steps if it's more helpful. So yeah, step 3 is actually step 1. Sorry, folks, you can change them around if it's more helpful to you in your own way of thinking. But hopefully it gives you an example of how you can get started, how easy it can be, and how things start rolling once you get pen to paper, fingers to keys, whatever it is. And also when you gather with people who care about these things just as much as you. It's certainly less scary to do it together with others than to go it alone. That should be step actually like 0 is like, do this with your friends, do this with other museum workers. Definitely find some solidarity and some support in this work. Okay, so this is the end of our formal presentation. There is our website. We do have an Instagram account at EMP Canada. We have a Facebook group, which, yep, the title is bilingual. Sorry, not sorry, French and English. And we also have a YouTube channel with a recording of a past program of ours and a couple of playlists. And you can also send us an email, emergingmuseproscan@gmail.com, if you have any questions. We'd certainly love to hear from you, and any Canadian EMPs who are interested will be recruiting for some new members this spring. So today is March 26, 2024, and our call will probably go out in the next 3 to 4 weeks if you're curious. So thank you so much to everyone coordinating Museum Workers Advocacy Day at NEMPN. This has been absolutely awesome. We know that government advocacy is not the fanciest, most exciting, most fun thing ever, but we have had, a little bit of success around it, wanted to share our learnings and share how it can be once you get things going. Relatively easy. Sometimes the hardest thing is just to get started. So I don't see any questions in the chat, which is absolutely all right. What I'm going to do is stop sharing, and I'm also going to stop recording. Myself and Anna will stay for another couple of minutes, just in case anyone has any questions that they want addressed that they don't want to be saved on the recording, and we will go from there. So thanks everybody, and take care of yourselves.